Hey guys, Grifton here, and today I want to talk about a hidden buff in Sunwell Plateau and how it'll affect tanking in Phase 5. Now before we start, feel free to like and subscribe as it really does help me out. Okay, so here we are in Sunwell Plateau, and there's a hidden secret in here you really need to know about. It's called Sunwell Radiance. The warm radiance of the Sunwell empowers the target, increasing its chance to hit by 5% and reducing the enemy's chance to dodge by 20%. Now I would kill for that buff, but sadly that buff isn't for players. Instead, it's applied to all the mobs in Sunwell Plateau, and it's hidden. This mostly unknown buff people have theorized was because of crushing blows, the 15% chance a boss has to hit you for 150% damage. Devs didn't really like crushing blows, so they mostly removed them in Sunwell Plateau. However, by removing them, they made bears pretty much indestructible, so they added this buff to make bears get hit more often. Now, regardless of the intent, the result was this actually made bears the best main tanks in Sunwell by a large margin, and I'm going to explain why. So, as a bear, you have no magical way to avoid damage. You either dodge, miss, or take it, and that's about it. So you can see how this buff looks targeted specifically at bears. It affects both of their avoidance abilities. Now let's look at how it affects the other tanks. So for warriors and paladins, they get a combination of dodge, parry, miss, and block, all working together to push them over the sacred 102.4 avoidance. Now by hitting 102.4, they can guarantee they will never be directly hit, but instead, at the very least, block most of the damage. Obviously, this is with the assumption that Holy Shield and Shield Block are up. Now, by hitting this number, they were also removing crushing blows from the attack table. I do want to point out that most warriors and paladins currently in TBC don't always achieve this number. Instead, they just eat the hits and lean more heavily on healers to keep them up. Now let's do an example of how this affects these tanks, specifically paladins. So if you're a paladin with 102.4 avoidance and you walk into Sunwell, you no longer mitigate all damage. Now by how much is going to depend on your avoidance consumption. So if you have 20 or more dodge, you'll be losing 25% avoidance, 20 from the dodge, and then the other 5 for the hit. But if you only have 15% dodge, you can only reduce it by 15 and therefore only lose a total of 20% avoidance. Now warriors shouldn't be too worried, their shield block is just so OP, changing a few pieces of gear and they're golden. Now however, because they are already struggling on threat, this isn't going to help their cause. Now paladins tend to be the bigger concern. They ride that cap pretty closely and they already take pretty hard damage, and pushing up another 20 to 25% avoidance means dropping some threat pieces, a move most paladins really don't want to make. So that's how it affects those two, but how does it benefit bears? So first, bears are kind of made to get hit. Unlike paladins and warriors, bears sit at around 30k armor in standard gear because that's what they expect. They expect to be hit, but they can easily hit the armor cap of 35,080 if they switch a few items and pop a consumer too. So it's not even a concern for them. On top of that, being hit can actually be a good thing. Bears with avoidance in the 60s are already starting to feel the rage starvation of dodging every hit. Now by getting hit more, they're actually able to generate more rage and thus build up more threat. And on top of that, because this buff was accompanied by the removal of crushing blows, it actually made the damage you did take much less. So like you never get those big spiky damages anymore because all the hits are just normalized. So you're going to be a nice smooth damage taker. Yes, you'll be getting hit more, but you won't be getting crushing blow at all. So like it kind of balances itself out as far as damage goes. So really just nothing really changes for a druid as far as damage, except they have more rage for threat and they laugh at the other two tanks that are just being smacked around. So does this mean druids are going to be the only tanks in Sunwell? No, of course not. Paladins will continue to be their big AoE machines, and once they get some gear, they'll likely have no problem tanking bosses in Sunwell anyway. Now in the meantime, there are some things paladins and warriors can do to mitigate the loss of mitigation. They can overstack their stats to move that 102.4 up closer to 127.4, thus eliminating any concern, but obviously keep in mind when they do this, they are sacrificing more threat. So if you're wondering why a lot of raids are switching to a double druid tanking roster, it's likely due to this little buff. Now if you don't switch to bear main tanks, you'll likely be fine, but make sure to tip your healers as they'll be working extra hard in Sunwell to keep the pinks and browns off the ground. I hope this video was helpful. Feel free to check out my other videos, and as always guys, take care.